My parents bought my sister a Tesla but made me take the bus to graduation. They regretted it when they saw who dropped me off. I'm Harper Williams. And at 22 years old, I was about to graduate from Harvard Business School. Last week, when I called my parents to finalize plans for my graduation ceremony, my father answered with his usual brusque tone. What he said next would encapsulate everything I'd experienced growing up in my family. We can't drive you to the ceremony. Take the bus. We're buying your sister a Bentley. He stated without hesitation. Cassandra was only graduating high school. The familiar sting of unfairness burned in my chest, a sensation I'd felt for years, though I'd become almost numb to it. But this time felt different. This wasn't about a birthday party or a family vacation. This was Harvard Business School graduation. The culmination of 4 years of relentless work, sacrifice, and determination. And they couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours to attend. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut home, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my younger sister. My father, Robert Williams, worked as chief financial officer for a Fortune 500 company. He was stern, methodical, and maintained impossibly high standards for everything and everyone around him. My mother, Elizabeth, was a renowned neurologist at a prestigious hospital in Boston. She was equally demanding, though in a more subtle, insidious way that made you question whether you were being unreasonable for wanting more warmth or affection. Together, they created an environment where excellence wasn't celebrated, it was simply expected. And only from me. When I was 4 years old, my sister, Cassandra, was born. I still remember the day my parents brought her home from the hospital. She had these impossibly big blue eyes and tufts of golden hair that caught the sunlight streaming through our living room windows. From that moment, it seemed like the spotlight in our family permanently shifted. I went from being the center of attention to the reliable older child who was expected to set an example, be responsible, and most importantly, not cause any trouble or require any additional effort from our parents. The pattern of favoritism started subtly, in ways that a young child might not immediately recognize as unfair. For my 8th birthday, I received a set of educational books about science and history. They were nice books, certainly, but hardly the stuff of childhood dreams. 2 months later, when Cassandra turned 4, she was gifted a lavish princess party, complete with a live pony in our backyard, an elaborate cake shaped like a castle, and what seemed like half the neighborhood in attendance. I told myself it was because she was younger and needed more attention, that perhaps my parents thought I was too mature for such frivolous celebrations. But as the years passed, the disparity only grew more obvious and more painful. Our family vacations became entirely centered around Cassandra's interests and desires. If she wanted to go to Disney World, we went to Disney World even though I'd outgrown it and desperately wanted to do something different. When I expressed interest in attending a specialized science camp instead of our annual beach trip this summer, I turned 12. My mother simply patted my head and said, "Maybe next year. Harper, your sister has been looking forward to the beach for months." Next year never came, and I learned to stop asking for things that deviated from Cassandra's preferences. School achievements were another area where the double standard became painfully, undeniably clear. I worked tirelessly to maintain straight A's, joining every academic club and competition I could find. I spent countless hours studying, researching, and perfecting my work. My report cards were consistently flawless, yet they were met with cursory nods and comments like, "That's what we expect from you, Harper," or "Of course you got all A's. You're the responsible one." There was never any celebration, never any special dinner or reward. Meanwhile, Cassandra would bring home B's and C's, sometimes even D's, and receive effusive praise for trying her best or showing improvement when she managed to scrape together a B-. By the time I reached high school, I had completely internalized the belief that I needed to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I joined the debate team and quickly became one of the top competitors in the state. I became editor of the school newspaper, transforming it from a forgettable monthly publication into an award-winning weekly that tackled real issues. I took every advanced placement class available, often staying up until midnight or later to complete assignments and study for exams. I was fueled by the desperate, perhaps naive hope that eventually my parents would look at me with the same pride and warmth they showed Cassandra when she got a minor role in the school play or made the junior varsity cheerleading squad. My relationship with Cassandra was complicated and layered with unspoken resentments and genuine sisterly affection that struggled to survive our parents' treatment of us. I never blamed her directly for our parents' favoritism, how could I? She was just as much a product of their parenting as I was. She hadn't asked to be put on a pedestal any more than I'd asked to be overlooked. But there was an undeniable distance between us. A chasm that grew wider with each passing year. Cassandra had grown accustomed to getting whatever she wanted without working for it or facing consequences for her actions. When she crashed her first car at 16, a brand new Audi our parents had given her for her birthday, my father simply bought her another one the next day, with barely a lecture about being more careful. When I had asked for help buying a used Honda to get me through my first year of college, he told me I should save up for my part-time job at the local coffee shop. The message was clear: Cassandra deserved new cars handed to her, while I should be grateful for the opportunity to work for my own transportation. The most painful memory, the one that crystallized my decision about how I would approach my future, came during my senior year of high school. I had been named valedictorian of my graduating class, an achievement that represented years of relentless work, sacrifice, and countless nights of studying, while other kids my age were out having fun. The ceremony was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in May, and I had reminded my parents about the date multiple times in the weeks leading up to it. When I mentioned it again at dinner a week before, my mother winced in a way that immediately made my stomach drop. "Oh, Harper, that's the same night as Cassandra's piano recital. She's been practicing for months. You understand, right? We can't miss her performance." I nodded automatically, the disappointment calcifying into something harder and colder in my chest. I didn't argue or make a scene. I had learned that expressing my needs or disappointment only resulted in being told I was being dramatic or selfish. So I simply said, "Of course. I understand." I attended my valedictorian ceremony alone. As I stood at the podium delivering my carefully crafted speech about perseverance and looking toward the future, I scanned the audience for familiar faces that weren't there. I saw my classmates' parents beaming with pride, recording every moment on their phones, wiping away tears of joy. The empty seats where my family should have been sitting felt like a physical weight on my chest. After the ceremony, I watched other families celebrate together, hugging, taking photos, going out for congratulatory dinners. I collected my certificate, changed out of my gown in the bathroom, and drove myself home in my used Honda that I'd bought with money I'd saved from working at the coffee shop, the grocery store, and tutoring younger students. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision that would shape the next 4 years of my life. I had received a partial scholarship to Harvard, enough to make it possible, but nowhere near enough to cover everything. My parents had vaguely mentioned helping with expenses, making non-committal comments about "we'll see what we can do, and you'll probably qualify for financial aid." But I decided in that moment that I would not ask them for a single dime. I would find a way to do this completely on my own, to prove to myself, if not to them, that I could succeed without their support or approval. The summer before college was a blur of exhaustion and determination. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously, a schedule that left me with barely 4 hours of sleep most nights. I was a barista at a busy downtown coffee shop from 5 in the morning until noon, an office assistant at a local accounting firm from 1 to 5 in the afternoon, and I tutored high school students in math and English in the evenings and on weekends. I saved every penny I could, living on pasta and whatever food I could get from my jobs, turning down invitations to hang out with friends because I couldn't afford even small luxuries like going to the movies or grabbing pizza. When August arrived and it was time to leave for Cambridge, I had saved enough to cover my first semester's expenses beyond tuition. I packed my belongings into 2 battered suitcases I'd found at a thrift store and prepared to leave. My parents seemed genuinely surprised when I declined their offer to drive me to campus. "I've got it covered," I told them, wheeling my suitcases toward the front door, where I'd arranged for a friend to pick me up and drive me to the bus station. My mother looked momentarily concerned, like probably worried about what it would look like to her friends if they heard her daughter had taken the bus to Harvard. "Do you have enough money for the semester? Harper College is very expensive." I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. "I've been saving all summer." My father glanced up from his newspaper just long enough to offer his parting wisdom. "College is expensive. Don't waste your money on frivolous things." Stay focused on your studies. That was the extent of their send-off. The sum total of their parental guidance as I left for one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Meanwhile, Cassandra was starting her freshman year of high school with a complete wardrobe overhaul from expensive boutiques, a new MacBook Pro, and an iPhone upgrade. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. But by then, I had stopped expecting anything different. I had stopped hoping for equity or fairness. I had accepted that this was simply how things were in our family, and I needed to find a way to survive and thrive despite it. As I closed the front door behind me that August morning, I felt a strange mixture of profound sadness and unexpected liberation. I was leaving behind a house that had never really felt like home, leaving behind parents who had never really seen me. But I was also stepping into a future that would be entirely my own creation, built by my own hands and shaped by my own choices. My first semester at Harvard was a brutal awakening to just how difficult my path would be. While many of my classmates were focusing solely on their studies, attending campus social events, and exploring Boston, I was juggling a full course load with 3 part-time jobs. I worked at the university library in the mornings, shelving books and helping students find research materials. Between classes, I delivered food for a local restaurant, racing across campus and through Cambridge streets to drop off orders. I spent my weekends as a retail associate at a clothing store near Harvard Square, folding clothes and ringing up purchases while my brain felt foggy from exhaustion. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Most nights I'd crawl into bed after midnight, having spent the evening either at work or hunched over textbooks in the library, then wake up at 5 in the morning to start the cycle again. Despite coming from a wealthy family, a fact that felt increasingly absurd and painful, I received zero financial support from my parents. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but everything else came out of my own pocket: housing, textbooks, meals, transportation, and all the hidden costs of college life that quickly add up. I lived in the smallest, cheapest dorm room available on campus, barely big enough to fit a twin bed, a desk, and a narrow dresser. I ate ramen noodles and instant oatmeal more often than I cared to admit, becoming an expert at finding free food at campus events and lectures. I learned which dining halls had the most generous portions, which campus organizations regularly provided pizza at their meetings, and which days the law school held receptions with catered food. It wasn't dignified, but it was necessary. During those early, difficult months, I met Jessica Rodriguez, a fellow business student who would become my closest friend and eventually my business partner. Jessica came from a single-parent household in Arizona and was also working multiple jobs to make ends meet. Her mother had cleaned houses for a living, working tirelessly to give Jessica opportunities she'd never had herself. We bonded immediately over our shared financial struggles and our determination not to let our circumstances define our futures. We became each other's support system, taking turns cooking affordable meals in the communal kitchen, making big batches of pasta or chili that we'd portion out and stretch for days. We split the cost of textbooks whenever possible, sometimes sharing one book between us and coordinating our study schedules accordingly. "How can your parents not help you at all?" Jessica asked one night as we sat cross-legged on her dorm room floor, highlighting passages in a used economics textbook we'd purchased together for half price, especially since they can clearly afford it. "You've told me about your house, your dad's job. They're not struggling financially." I shrugged, trying to appear unbothered, even as her question touched on the wound that never quite healed. "They believe in self-sufficiency. I guess. They think I need to learn to make my own way." "That's not self-sufficiency," Jessica replied, her voice tinged with righteous indignation on my behalf. "That's neglect. There's a difference between teaching your kid to be independent and refusing to help them when you easily could, especially when they're buying your sister designer clothes and new cars. That's just cruel." It was the first time someone had named the disparity so bluntly, without trying to excuse it or explain it away. Something about hearing it from another person, someone who genuinely cared about me and had no stake in maintaining family harmony, made the reality of my situation hit harder. Jessica's straightforward acknowledgement of how unfair my circumstances were gave me permission to feel angry about it, rather than just resigned. In my sophomore year, I met Jake Thornton in my economics class. He was charming, intelligent, came from a wealthy family in New York, and seemed genuinely interested in me not just as a study partner or classmate, but as a person. We started dating. And for a while, it felt like I had found someone who truly saw me, who valued me for who I was rather than for what I could achieve or how little trouble I caused. Jake was generous and kind, always trying to treat me to nice dinners at Boston's upscale restaurants or surprise me with weekend getaways to Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard. But my pride and my determination to remain financially independent made it difficult to accept his generosity. I insisted on paying my own way, even when it meant working extra shifts to afford my half of our dates. I would skip meals earlier in the day to save money for dinner with Jake, or pick up additional delivery shifts on weekends to pay for my share of a hotel room or train tickets. It was exhausting and probably unnecessary, but I couldn't shake the fear that if I became dependent on Jake's money or anyone's money, I would lose the independence I'd fought so hard to maintain. The relationship began to strain under the weight of Jake's growing frustration with my unwillingness to let him help me. "Just let me take care of it," he would say, his voice tight with exasperation when I insisted on splitting yet another dinner bill or declined his invitation to an expensive concert because I couldn't afford the ticket. Or better yet, ask your parents for help. "I don't understand why you're making things so hard on yourself when you don't have to." No matter how many times I tried to explain my relationship with my parents and my reasons for maintaining financial independence, he never truly understood. He came from a loving, supportive family who had paid for his entire Harvard education without hesitation, who sent him care packages and extra spending money, who flew him home for every holiday and break. He simply couldn't comprehend what it was like to have parents who were financially capable of helping but chose not to, or how that shaped every aspect of how I viewed myself and my relationships. Our relationship ended after 8 months, when Jake surprised me with plane tickets to Paris for spring break. He presented them over dinner at an Italian restaurant, beaming with excitement about showing me the city he'd visited multiple times with his family. When I explained that I couldn't go because I had already committed to working double shifts throughout spring break, both to earn money and because holiday weeks meant better tips and higher delivery fees, his face fell. Then the disappointment turned to anger. "You're choosing work over Paris, over us," he demanded, his voice rising enough that other diners glanced our way. "Harper, this is insane. You're being stubborn and ungrateful. I'm trying to do something nice for you, something amazing, and you're throwing it back in my face because of some misguided principle about not accepting help." We broke up that night, adding heartbreak to my already overwhelming list of challenges. As I walked alone back to my dorm through the cold March air, tears freezing on my cheeks, I wondered if Jake was right. Was I being unreasonably stubborn? Was I sabotaging my own happiness and opportunities because I was too proud to accept help? But then I reminded myself why I'd made this choice in the first place. Independence wasn't just about paying my own bills. It was about knowing I could rely on myself, that I could succeed on my own terms without owing anyone anything or being beholden to their expectations or conditions. The holidays were particularly difficult, bringing my isolation into sharp relief. While other students went home to celebrate with their families, I often stayed on campus to pick up extra work hours. The campus was eerily quiet during breaks, most buildings locked and dark, when the usual bustle of student life replaced by an almost oppressive silence. During my first Thanksgiving at Harvard, I called home hoping for at least a warm conversation, some connection to family, even if I couldn't be there in person. "We miss you, Harper," my mother said when she answered, though I could hear the distraction in her voice, the sounds of activity and conversation in the background. "We're about to sit down for dinner. Cassandra made the most beautiful centerpiece for the table. She's really developing quite an eye for design." I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses, could picture them all gathered around our dining room table without me. "That's nice," I managed to say. "I hope you all have a good dinner." "Yes. Well, I should let you go so we can eat while everything's hot," she replied. "Call again soon, sweetheart." She hung up before I could respond, before I could tell her that I was spending Thanksgiving alone in my dorm room with instant ramen and a borrowed laptop, or that I missed home despite everything, or that sometimes I felt so isolated and exhausted that I wasn't sure I could keep going. Instead, I spent that Thanksgiving evening working a double shift at a local restaurant, serving turkey dinners to other people's families, watching them laugh and celebrate together, while I rushed between tables with plates and tried to smile when they wished me a happy holiday. The turning point in my college experience came during my junior year when I enrolled in Professor Wilson's financial technology course. Professor Wilson was unlike many of the other professors I'd had at Harvard. She paid attention to all her students, not just the ones who spoke up in class or came from influential families. She noticed when someone was struggling, when someone was working harder than their performance might suggest, when someone had potential that wasn't immediately obvious. After I turned in a paper analyzing emerging trends in digital payment systems, a paper I'd researched and written during a series of overnight shifts at the library, she asked me to stay after class. "This is graduate-level work, Harper," she said, gesturing to my paper with genuine admiration in her voice. "The depth of analysis, the original thinking, the way you've connected technological innovations to broader economic patterns, this is exceptional. Have you considered focusing on financial technology for your career?" That conversation marked the beginning of a mentorship that would fundamentally change the trajectory of my life. Professor Wilson became the supportive adult figure I had always craved but never found in my own parents. She recommended books and research papers, introduced me to contacts in the tech and finance industries, invited me to conferences and symposiums where I could network with professionals. Most importantly, she believed in my potential, with a conviction that gradually helped me believe in it too. Under her guidance, I began to explore the emerging world of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology with increasing fascination. This was in 2019, when Bitcoin was recovering from a significant crash but still hadn't achieved mainstream adoption. The technology was intriguing but plagued with problems, security issues, accessibility barriers, volatile value fluctuations, and a general distrust from traditional financial institutions and everyday consumers. I became obsessed with understanding these problems and envisioning solutions. I spent countless hours in the library, researching everything I could find about cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, cryptographic security, and financial systems. I taught myself to code, working through online tutorials during my breaks between jobs, practicing late into the night after my shifts ended. By the end of my junior year, what had started as academic interest had evolved into a concrete business idea. I envisioned a platform that would make cryptocurrency transactions more secure and accessible to everyday users, not just tech-savvy investors or people comfortable with the current complicated systems. I wanted to create something that would bridge the gap between traditional banking security and accessibility and cryptocurrency's innovation and potential. Professor Wilson encouraged me to pursue the idea with characteristic directness and enthusiasm. "You've identified a genuine gap in the market," she told me during one of our regular meetings in her office. "This could be significant if you can execute it properly. The question is whether you're willing to take the risk and put in the work to make it happen." For the first time since arriving at Harvard, I felt a sense of purpose that went beyond just surviving semester to semester, beyond just proving I could succeed despite my circumstances. I had found something I was genuinely passionate about, something that could potentially change the financial landscape and make a real difference in people's lives. And unlike my relationship with my parents, my success in this venture would be entirely within my control, dependent only on my own skills, determination, and ability to execute my vision. The summer before my senior year, I made the decision to dedicate myself entirely to developing my business idea. While my classmates were securing prestigious internships at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey, or traveling through Europe and Asia, or relaxing at their families' vacation homes, I was holed up in a tiny, sweltering apartment I shared with Jessica. We had found a cheap sublet in Somerville, and I spent that entire summer writing code, drafting business plans, and refining my concept. My workspace was a card table in the corner of our living room, my computer, an outdated laptop I'd bought used, my resources limited to free online tools and whatever I could access through Harvard's digital library. Jessica, who had secured a paid internship at a consulting firm, it would come home in the evenings to find me still hunched over my laptop, surrounded by empty coffee cups and notebook pages covered in diagrams and calculations. "Have you eaten today?" she'd ask. And more often than not, I'd realize I hadn't, and too absorbed in my work to notice hunger or the passage of time. My concept was evolving into what would eventually become SecurePay, a platform designed to make cryptocurrency transactions as easy and secure as traditional banking while maintaining the advantages of decentralized digital currency. I was developing a proprietary security algorithm that would address many of the vulnerabilities that made people distrust cryptocurrency, combined with a user interface that would be intuitive enough for people with no technical background. The Harvard Business School hosted an annual startup competition that awarded seed funding and resources to the most promising student ventures. With Professor Wilson's strong encouragement, I decided to enter. I spent weeks refining my pitch, creating prototypes and demonstrations, preparing for every possible question the judges might ask, and practicing my presentation until I could deliver it confidently, even while exhausted. The night before the competition, I rehearsed my presentation for Jessica for what must have been the 20th time. "Harper, you need to sleep," she insisted after I'd run through it 3 times in a row, making tiny adjustments to my wording and timing. "You know this inside and out. You've prepared more than anyone else will have. You're ready." The competition was fierce, with over 100 student ventures competing across various categories: tech startups, social enterprises, healthcare innovations, consumer products. When they announced SecurePay as the overall winner, I almost couldn't process the information. The prize was $50,000 in seed funding, office space in the University Innovation Center, and mentorship from successful entrepreneurs. It was more support than I had ever received for anything in my life. And it came not from my family, but from people who recognized the value of my ideas and the quality of my work. The win attracted attention from several angel investors who had attended the competition as judges or observers, including Michael Chen, a successful tech entrepreneur who had made his fortune in the early days of social media. He reached out through Professor Wilson and invited me to lunch to discuss my company. We met at a restaurant near Harvard Square, and after some initial pleasantries, he got straight to the point. "I'll cut to the chase," he said, leaning forward across the table. "I'm prepared to offer you $2 million for the entire concept right now. You can finish your degree without any financial worries. And I'll take it from here. I have the resources and the team to scale this quickly." It was a staggering offer. More money than I'd ever imagined having. $2 million would have solved all my financial problems instantly and permanently. I could have paid off my student loans, secured comfortable housing, helped Jessica with her expenses, never had to work multiple jobs again. I could have focused entirely on my studies for my final year, maybe even traveled, experienced some of the college life I'd been too busy to enjoy. But something held me back. I had poured myself into this concept, had seen its potential, had developed not just a business plan, but a genuine vision for how it could transform the cryptocurrency landscape. The idea of handing it over to someone else, even someone as qualified as Michael, felt wrong. "Thank you, but I'm not looking to sell," I heard myself say, my voice steadier than I felt. "I believe in what I'm building, and I want to see it through myself." Michael looked surprised but not displeased by my response. "Most students would jump at that offer without a second thought," he observed. "I'm not most students," I replied simply. The next day, Michael called again with a different proposal. Instead of buying SecurePay outright, he wanted to invest $500,000 for a 15% stake in the company. This time, after discussing it with Professor Wilson and carefully considering the terms, I accepted. With Michael's investment, I could officially incorporate the company, hire a small team to help with development, and significantly accelerate our timeline to launch. The following months were the most challenging and exhilarating of my life. I was still a full-time student with a demanding course load. But now I was also the CEO of a real company with employees, investors, and serious responsibilities. I hired 2 brilliant computer science students as part-time developers and a graduate student with marketing experience to help build our brand and strategy. We worked out of a cramped room in the Innovation Center, just 4 desks, a whiteboard, and determination. We coded until the early hours of the morning, fueled by pizza and coffee and the genuine excitement of building something innovative. There were moments when it all seemed impossible, when the challenges felt insurmountable. 3 months after we started, we discovered a critical flaw in our security protocol that required rewriting almost half of our code. I didn't sleep for 4 days straight as we worked frantically to fix it. terrified that the problem would become known before we could solve it and destroy our credibility before we'd even launched. Then one of our developers quit unexpectedly to take a full-time job at Google, leaving us shorthanded just weeks before an important deadline with potential partners. Our bank account was dwindling faster than I'd anticipated, and we were still months away from having a fully marketable product. During one particularly low point, I sat alone in our office late at night, staring at our budget spreadsheet and the timeline to launch, and called Professor Wilson in tears. "I think I've made a huge mistake," I confessed, my voice breaking. "We're going to run out of money before we even launch. I'm failing my team, and I'm going to lose everything I've worked for." "Every successful entrepreneur has moments exactly like this," she assured me, as her voice calm and confident even as mine trembled. "The ones who succeed aren't the ones who never face these moments, they're the ones who push through them." "Which one are you going to be?" Her words, simple as they were, steeled my resolve. I doubled down on our efforts, took on even more of the coding work myself to reduce costs, and reached out to my growing network for additional resources and advice. Jessica, despite having no technical background, offered to help with administrative tasks for free on evenings and weekends, organizing our paperwork and helping manage our schedule. We survived that crisis through sheer determination and the support of people who believed in our vision. The breakthrough came in March of my senior year. After months of intensive work, we finally perfected our proprietary security algorithm. It allowed cryptocurrency transactions to process 30% faster than any existing platform, while maintaining bank-level security, solving two of the biggest problems that had prevented mainstream cryptocurrency adoption. When we demonstrated the technology to Michael and his network of investors, the response was immediately and overwhelmingly positive. "This changes everything," Michael said after watching our demonstration, his eyes wide with genuine excitement. "This is exactly what the market has been waiting for. How quickly can you prepare for a Series A funding round?" With Michael's connections and endorsement, we secured meetings with some of the top venture capital firms in Boston and New York. Our timing coincided perfectly with a renewed interest in cryptocurrency following Bitcoin's remarkable recovery and increasing mainstream attention. After a whirlwind month of pitches, negotiations, and due diligence, we closed a funding round of $50 million at a company valuation of $700 million. The investment news made ripples through the tech and finance communities, appearing in TechCrunch, Business Insider, and other industry publications. But I made the conscious decision to keep a low profile, declining most interview requests and avoiding public appearances. More importantly, I didn't tell my family about any of it. Part of me wanted to prove I could succeed completely on my own before revealing anything to them. Another part, if I'm being honest, wanted to see their faces when they finally discovered what I had built while they were busy doting on Cassandra and dismissing my achievements. By the time my graduation approached, SecurePay had grown to a team of 30 employees. We had moved into a proper office space, launched our beta platform to select users, and were receiving overwhelmingly positive feedback. Our valuation had climbed to just over $1 billion, officially making my company a unicorn in startup terminology and making me, on paper at least, a billionaire at 22 years old. Despite these extraordinary developments in my professional life, I maintained my routine at Harvard, completing all my coursework and preparing for graduation. Only a handful of people knew about my company's success: my team, Professor Wilson, Jessica, and my investors. I preferred it that way. I had spent my entire life being overlooked and underestimated by my family. There was something satisfying about continuing to exceed expectations in ways they couldn't even imagine. Professor Wilson, who had watched my entire journey from that first conversation after class, could barely contain her pride. "You know, Forbes is doing their under 30 list soon," she mentioned casually during one of our last meetings. "I may have nominated you, and I may have heard through the grapevine that you're going to be featured prominently." I laughed it off at the time, but secretly I was starting to allow myself to feel genuinely proud of what I had accomplished. Against all odds, without family support or connections or financial backing from the people who should have been my biggest supporters, I had built something valuable and innovative. The validation I had sought from my parents for so long had finally come, but from a completely different source. I had found it within myself and from people who recognized my worth based on my actual achievements. As May approached, and with it my graduation ceremony, I experienced a complicated mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt immense pride in completing my degree while simultaneously building a billion-dollar company. On the other hand, despite everything, I couldn't shake the lingering desire for my family to witness this milestone. Some childish part of me that hadn't been completely hardened by years of neglect still wanted them to see me walk across that stage, to finally recognize what I had achieved. 3 weeks before graduation, I mailed formal invitations to my parents and Cassandra. I included tickets for the ceremony and wrote a handwritten note expressing how much it would mean to have them there. Then I waited, checking my phone more frequently than I wanted to admit, hoping for an enthusiastic response or even just acknowledgement. The call came on a Tuesday evening as I was leaving the SecurePay office after a long day of meetings. Seeing my father's name on the screen sent a familiar flutter of anxiety through my chest, that old, ingrained response to seeking his approval despite knowing better by now. "Hello? Dad," I answered, forcing my voice to sound casual and unaffected. "Harper," he acknowledged in his typical businesslike tone. "We received your graduation invitation." "Yes," I said, waiting for the congratulations or excitement that I knew deep down wouldn't come. "I hope you can make it. It would mean a lot to me." There was a pause, and I heard my mother's voice in the background asking who was calling. "It's Harper," my father replied to her before returning to our conversation. "We have a conflict that weekend." My heart sank, though I wasn't surprised. "What kind of conflict?" "Cassandra has her high school graduation the same week, and we have several celebration activities planned for her. The timing just isn't going to work for us to drive up to Cambridge." He swallowed hard, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Her high school graduation is on Thursday. Mine is on Saturday. You could attend both." "Well, we're also taking her on a shopping trip to New York that weekend as part of her graduation gift. We're going to help her pick out furniture and decor for her UCLA dorm room. The plans have been set for months." I gripped my phone tighter, my knuckles white. "I sent these invitations as soon as they were available." "Dad, this is my Harvard Business School graduation. It's kind of a big deal." "Of course it is," he said, that his tone softening marginally in that way that was supposed to sound supportive but just felt patronizing. "And we're very proud of you. Harper, you've always been self-sufficient and responsible. I'm sure you'll be fine handling this on your own." "Too. You always are." Then he delivered the line that would stick with me forever. The statement that somehow encapsulated everything wrong with our family dynamic. "You'll have to take the bus to your ceremony. We're buying your sister a Bentley for her graduation present." I nearly dropped my phone in shock. A Bentley? She's 18 years old and hasn't even started college yet. "She's worked very hard to get into UCLA," my father defended, his voice taking on that edge of irritation he got when anyone questioned his decisions. "And we want to reward her accomplishment. She deserves something special." The irony was so absurd I almost laughed out loud right there on the street. Cassandra had gotten into UCLA with a 3.2 gigapascals and a significant legacy advantage because our father was an alumnus who had donated generously to the university. Meanwhile, I had graduated top of my class from one of the most competitive prep schools in Connecticut, gotten into Harvard entirely on merit with no connections or advantages, and maintained a perfect 4.0 gigapascals while simultaneously building a billion-dollar company, all without a cent of their support. "I see," was all I could manage to say, my voice flat. "You've always been the responsible one, Harper," my mother chimed in, apparently having taken the phone from my father or having joined on speakerphone. "We never have to worry about you. You handle everything so well on your own." Their words were clearly meant as a compliment, but they landed like an indictment of everything wrong with our relationship. I had been punished with indifference for my competence, while Cassandra was rewarded lavishly for meeting basic expectations. My achievements made me invisible. Her mediocrity made her celebrated. After hanging up, I stood frozen on the sidewalk outside my office building. Other pedestrians flowing around me as the early evening crowds headed home or out to dinner. The spring air was pleasant, the city alive with energy and possibility. But I felt hollowed out. Jessica found me there 10 minutes later, still staring at my phone. "What happened?" she asked immediately. Recognizing the expression on my face, I recounted the conversation mechanically, my voice hollow and detached. "They're buying Cassandra a Bentley for getting into college." "A Bentley?" "Jessica. She's 18. And they can't even drive 2 hours to see me graduate from Harvard Business School." Jessica put her arm around me, her presence warm and solid and real, in a way my parents' love had never been. "Harper, they don't deserve to be there anyway. We're your family now, all of us at Secure Pay." "Professor Wilson, me, we're the ones who know what you've accomplished and what you've overcome. We'll be cheering louder than anyone when you walk across that stage." Later that evening, Professor Wilson called to check on my graduation plans. When I told her about my parents' decision, she was uncharacteristically blunt. "Some people are incapable of celebrating others' success because it reminds them of their own limitations and failures as parents," she said firmly. "Don't let their absence diminish your achievement. You've earned this moment entirely on your own merits." Despite the support from my chosen family, the rejection still stung deeply. That night, I made a decision. I would indeed take the bus to my graduation ceremony, exactly as my father had suggested. There was a certain poetic justice to it that appealed to me. I would arrive by public transportation, walk across that stage to receive my Harvard diploma, and return to my office as the CEO of a billion-dollar company that was revolutionizing an entire industry. Meanwhile, my sister would be cruising around Los Angeles in her new Bentley, posting photos on Instagram and living the life our parents had always made easy for her. 2 days before graduation, I received an unexpected email from the dean of Harvard Business School requesting an urgent meeting, concerned that there might be some issue with my degree or graduation status. I went to his office immediately, my mind racing through possibilities. "Miss Williams." Dean Harrison greeted me warmly as I entered his office. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please, have a seat." "Is everything all right with my graduation?" I asked, unable to hide the worry in my voice. He smiled reassuringly. "More than all right. I just received a call from Forbes magazine. You've been named to their 30 under 30 list in the finance category. But more significantly, they're featuring you in their upcoming issue as the youngest self-made female billionaire in the technology sector. The article will be published the day before graduation." I felt my stomach flip. I had known the Forbes recognition was coming. Professor Wilson had warned me, but I'd hoped to keep that information private for a bit longer, at least until after graduation. "I understand your desire for privacy," Dean Harrison continued, seeming to read my thoughts. "But this is an extraordinary achievement that brings great prestige to Harvard Business School. With your permission, we would like to recognize this accomplishment during the graduation ceremony. Nothing too elaborate, just a brief mention during your introduction as class valedictorian." My initial instinct was to decline. I had grown accustomed to succeeding quietly, to achieving without fanfare or recognition. But then I thought about my parents potentially sitting in the audience if they even bothered to show up at all, completely unaware of what I had built. Ready to leave immediately after the ceremony to return to celebrating Cassandra's high school graduation and shopping for her dorm room furniture. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I asked carefully. "Just a brief mention during your introduction as class valedictorian when you come up to receive your diploma. Nothing that would make you uncomfortable or put you too much in the spotlight. Just an acknowledgement of your remarkable achievement." I considered it for a long moment, weighing my desire for privacy against the satisfaction of finally having my accomplishments publicly recognized. "That would be fine," I agreed, as I left his office and walked back through Harvard Yard. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Cassandra. "Mom and Dad decided we can come to your graduation after all. See you Saturday." I stared at the message, a complex tangle of emotions rising in my chest. After everything, after telling me to take the bus and prioritizing a shopping trip over my graduation, they had suddenly changed their minds. But I knew it wasn't because they'd had some epiphany about the importance of my graduation or their years of neglect. Something else had motivated this last-minute decision, though I couldn't immediately figure out what. Then it hit me. The Forbes article was being published the day before graduation. They must have seen it, or someone had told them about it. They weren't coming to celebrate my graduation, They were coming because they'd finally realized I was successful enough to be worth their attention. Whatever their motivation, I thought grimly. They were about to get more than they bargained for. Graduation day dawned clear and beautiful. One of those perfect May mornings that makes Cambridge look like a postcard. The sky was brilliantly blue. The trees were in full bloom, and the air held just a hint of the warmth that would build as the day progressed. I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment, carefully adjusting my cap and smoothing the crimson graduation robe over the simple but elegant dress I'd chosen for underneath. Despite knowing my parents would now be attending for whatever self-serving reasons, I kept my original plan to take the bus to campus. It felt important somehow. A reminder of the journey I had made largely on my own. A way of honoring the person I'd become through struggle, rather than privilege. The public bus was nearly empty that early on a Saturday morning. I sat by the window, watching the familiar streets of Cambridge pass by, reflecting on how far I had come since arriving as a frightened, exhausted freshman 4 years earlier. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my team at SecurePay wishing me congratulations, along with several from Jessica saying she had saved seats near the front for herself and Professor Wilson, and a particularly touching one from Michael Chin, expressing his pride in everything I'd accomplished. When I arrived at Harvard Yard, the transformation was stunning. Rows upon rows of white chairs lined the lawn. Crimson banners hung from every building and lamppost, and a massive stage had been erected for the ceremony. Families were already gathering despite the early hour, taking photos and embracing their graduates. The air filled with excitement and pride. I scanned the growing crowd, looking for my family. I spotted them near the registration table, my father in his customary dark suit looking slightly uncomfortable in the academic setting, my mother elegant in a pale blue dress and pearls, and Cassandra looking bored as she scrolled through her phone, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. They hadn't noticed me yet, giving me a moment to observe them with fresh eyes. They looked exactly as they always had, polished, successful, perfectly put together. Yet somehow, after everything I'd been through, I felt like a completely different person, seeing them from a new perspective. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I approached. "You made it," I said simply. My mother turned first, her face lighting up with her practiced social smile. "Harper, darling, look at you all ready for graduation." She leaned in for a brief hug, and I caught the scent of her expensive Chanel perfume, a smell that had defined my childhood in both comforting and painful ways. My father offered a firm handshake instead of an embrace, as was his way. The traffic was better than expected. "Your mother insisted we leave at dawn." There was a hint of complaint in his voice, as if their attendance was a great sacrifice. Cassandra finally looked up from her phone, and I was surprised to see something in her expression that looked almost like genuine respect. "Congrats, sis. Seriously, I read that Forbes article. I had no idea you were doing all that." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "I appreciate you coming. I know it's early, and it's a long drive." "We wouldn't miss it," my mother said, though we both knew that was a lie. They absolutely would have missed it. They had planned to miss it until they discovered I was worth their time after all. Before the awkwardness could deepen, an announcement requested that graduates gather for the processional. "I have to go line up," I said, relieved to have an excuse to leave. "There are reserved seats for family in Section C, rows 3 through 5. As I walked away, I heard Cassandra ask, "How long is this going to take? I'm supposed to meet friends later." Some things never changed. The ceremony began with all the pomp and tradition Harvard is known for. We processed into pomp and circumstance, the classic graduation march that never fails to evoke emotion. The May sunshine was warm but not oppressive, a gentle breeze occasionally rustling our robes and programs. We took our seats in the specially designated graduate section, and I found myself surrounded by classmates I'd spent 4 years with, some I knew well. Many I'd been too busy to get to know properly. The opening remarks came from university officials, speeches about the future and responsibility and making our mark on the world. Distinguished faculty members were recognized. Honorary degrees were conferred on several notable individuals. And through it all, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching the proceedings from outside myself. When it came time for the business school graduates to receive their diplomas, Dean Harrison approached the podium. Degrees were conferred by category, first those with honors, then those with high honors, and finally those with highest honors. As valedictorian, I would be called last in my category, and I would give a brief speech before the ceremony continued with the other graduate schools. One by one, my classmates crossed the stage to applause and cheers from their families and friends. I watched them shake hands with the dean, accept their diplomas, pose for the official photographer, and return to their seats with expressions of joy and relief and pride. Then it was my turn. Harper Williams, Dean Harrison announced, his voice carrying across the yard through the sound system. Graduating summa cum laude, with highest distinction in business administration. I rose from my seat and made my way to the stage, conscious of hundreds of eyes following my progress. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. I had earned this moment through years of sacrifice and determination. I crossed the center stage, shook Dean Harrison's hand, and accepted my diploma. The leather folder was heavier than I expected, solid and real in my hands. I expected him to step back and allow me to move to the podium for my valedictorian speech, but instead he held onto the microphone and continued speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice taking on a tone of barely contained excitement, "I have the extraordinary privilege of announcing that Miss Williams is not only our class valedictorian, but has recently been recognized by Forbes magazine as the youngest self-made billionaire in this year's graduating class. While completing her degree with perfect marks, she founded and built SecurePay, a financial technology company that is revolutionizing cryptocurrency transactions and has achieved a valuation of over $1 billion. A collective gasp rose from the audience, followed by a moment of stunned silence before enthusiastic applause erupted. I risked a glance toward where my family was sitting and had to suppress a smile at what I saw. My father had literally dropped his program, the pages scattering at his feet as his mouth fell open in shock. My mother sat frozen, one hand covering her mouth, her carefully composed expression cracked by genuine surprise. Even Cassandra was staring at me with her jaw open, her phone forgotten in her lap for perhaps the first time all morning. The applause continued, growing louder as my classmates and their families processed this information. Many of my fellow graduates were rising to their feet, and I saw genuine admiration and respect in their faces. These were some of the brightest, most accomplished students in the world, and they were giving me a standing ovation. Dean Harrison gestured for me to take the podium for my valedictory address. As I stepped up to the microphone and adjusted it to my height, the applause gradually subsided and people returned to their seats. Looking out at the sea of faces, I spotted Jessica and Professor Wilson in the front section, both beaming with pride and unconcealed joy. My team from SecurePay was there too, several rows back, all of them on their feet clapping wildly. My family remained in their seats, still looking stunned. My father was bent over, scrambling to retrieve his scattered program pages with shaking hands. 4 years ago, I began, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. Many of us arrived at Harvard with dreams, ambitions, and more than a little fear of the unknown. We came from different backgrounds, with vastly different resources and support systems, but we shared a common goal: to learn, to grow, and ultimately, to make our mark on the world. I continued with my prepared remarks, though I'd revised them significantly the night before to reflect my journey more honestly. I spoke about perseverance in the face of obstacles, about innovation born from necessity, and about finding your purpose even when, perhaps especially when, others don't believe in you. Success, I said, letting my gaze sweep across the audience, is not measured by the recognition we receive or the wealth we accumulate. It's measured by the obstacles we overcome and the person we become in the process of overcoming them. Every one of us graduating today has a unique story of challenges faced and conquered. Mine involved building a company between classes, working multiple jobs to support myself, and discovering that I was capable of far more than I had ever been led to believe about myself. I spoke about self-belief and resilience, about surrounding yourself with people who see your potential and support your vision. I thank Professor Wilson by name, and Jessica, and my team at SecurePay. I talked about the importance of defining success for yourself rather than accepting others' definitions of what your life should look like. Some of us had families who supported us financially and emotionally through these 4 years. I said, my voice taking on a slightly harder edge. Others of us had to forge our own path, create our own support systems, and prove our worth to ourselves before anyone else would see it. Both journeys are valid. Both journeys build character. But I would argue that there's a particular strength that comes from succeeding when no one expects you to. From building something, when you have nothing to build it with, except your own determination and vision. As I concluded my speech to thunderous applause, I saw my classmates rising to their feet again. The standing ovation continued for what felt like minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds or so. Many of my classmates had tears in their eyes. They understood the subtext of my words, even if they didn't know the full details of my story. I returned to my seat, my heart still pounding, but feeling a sense of completion I had never experienced before. This wasn't about revenge or showing up my parents, though I won't pretend that wasn't satisfying. This was about claiming my own narrative, about publicly acknowledging my journey and my achievements in a way I'd never allowed myself to do before. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. More graduates received their diplomas. More speeches were given. More applause rang out across Harvard Yard. When the final graduate had crossed the stage and the closing remarks were complete, we tossed our caps into the air with joyous abandon. In that moment, surrounded by falling caps and celebrating peers in warm sunlight, I felt genuinely free. As graduates and families began to mingle on the lawn, I was immediately surrounded by classmates I barely knew, offering congratulations and asking questions about secure pay. I had no idea you were building a company. One woman said, you were always so focused in class, but I thought you were just really dedicated to your studies. Professors I had studied under came to shake my hand and offer their congratulations. Several, admitting they had no idea what I'd been doing outside of their classrooms. The dean of the business school himself introduced me to several important alumni donors, clearly pleased to claim me as one of Harvard's success stories. Through the crowd, I could see my family attempting to make their way toward me. My father looked determined, almost aggressive in the way he was pushing past other families. My mother followed in his wake, her expression cycling between confusion, calculation, and something that might have been shame. Cassandra trailed behind, looking at her phone but occasionally glancing up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I excused myself from a conversation with a venture capitalist who was trying to give me his card and turned to face my family, feeling strangely calm about the confrontation I knew was coming. Whatever happened next, I would be okay. I had proven that to myself beyond any shadow of doubt. As my parents finally reached me through the dispersing crowd, the contrast between our last phone conversation and their current demeanor couldn't have been more stark. My father, who had so dismissively told me to take the bus just days earlier, now extended his arms for an embrace with a broad smile I had rarely seen directed at me. "Harper," he exclaimed, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "Why didn't you tell us about your company? $1 billion valuation at your age. This is absolutely extraordinary. I'm so proud of you." I accepted his hug stiffly, noting how different it felt from the genuine warmth of Jessica's embrace earlier or Professor Wilson's proud handshake. This felt performative, calculated, completely insincere. It never seemed relevant to our conversations. I replied evenly, stepping back from his embrace. "You were always so focused on Cassandra's accomplishments. I didn't want to burden you with mine." My mother stepped forward next, when her social smile firmly in place, despite the obvious shock still lingering in her eyes. "Darling, we are so incredibly proud of you. A self-made billionaire at 22. This is remarkable. You must tell us everything about this company of yours, how it works. Your plans for the future. Everything." The sudden interest was jarring after so many years of indifference and neglect. I could almost see the calculations happening behind their eyes, the rapid recalibration of my value in their estimation. The realization that I was now someone worth paying attention to, someone who could bring prestige to the family name. Secure pay has been my focus for the past 2 years, I explained, keeping my tone professional and somewhat distant. We've developed a proprietary security platform for cryptocurrency transactions that addresses many of the security and accessibility concerns that have limited mainstream adoption of digital currencies. 2 years, my father repeated. And now there was a hint of something else in his voice, hurt or offense that I had kept this from him. You've been working on this the entire time you've been completing your degree, and you never once thought to ask for my help or advice. Harper, I have considerable financial experience and connections that could have benefited you tremendously. I could have opened doors, made introductions, helped you avoid costly mistakes. The question was so tone-deaf, so utterly lacking in self-awareness, that I almost laughed out loud. I didn't think you would be interested. I said simply, you made it quite clear early on that I was expected to handle my education and my life independently. I was just following your guidance. Several of my classmates were still hovering nearby, clearly intrigued by the family drama playing out before them. I spotted Jessica making her way toward us, her expression protective and concerned. She had heard enough stories about my parents over the past 4 years to recognize when I might need backup. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, Jessica said smoothly as she joined us, extending her hand with professional courtesy. I'm Jessica Rodriguez, Harper's friend and roommate throughout college, and now Chief Operating Officer at Secure Pay. Your daughter is quite literally the most brilliant, hardworking, and resilient person I have ever met. You must be incredibly proud to have raised such an extraordinary woman. Her words were polite on the surface, but there was an edge to them, a subtle challenge that my parents couldn't miss. My father shook her hand automatically, his business instincts taking over. Of course. Very pleased to meet you. Yes. Very proud. The Williams family has always had a tradition of excellence and achievement. Cassandra, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. Is it really true what they said up there? You're actually a billionaire now, like. For real. There was no jealousy in her question. No resentment, just genuine curiosity, and perhaps a hint of awe. For the first time, I wondered if Cassandra had been as trapped in our parents' dynamics as I had been. Just in a different way. Maybe she'd been cast in the role of the indulged favorite against her will. The same way I'd been cast as the overlooked achiever. On paper. Yes. I answered her directly, appreciating her straightforward question. The company is valued at just over $1 billion, and I retain majority ownership. But it's not like I have $1 billion in the bank. Most of it is theoretical value based on what investors believe the company will be worth in the future. That's still incredibly cool, she said simply. I always knew you were smart, like. Scary smart. But this is next level. I read that whole Forbes article. The stuff you've built is actually changing how people think about cryptocurrency. Her genuine admiration felt more real and more valuable than all of our parents' effusive praise. I found myself smiling at her, a real, warm smile. Thank you, Cass. That means a lot coming from you. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with not being the center of the conversation. Well, we should celebrate this momentous occasion properly. I took the liberty of making reservations at L'Espalier for dinner this evening, just the 4 of us. It's one of the finest restaurants in Boston. We can catch up properly. And you can tell us all about your business plans and how we can help you take the company to the next level. I noticed the swift pivot in his language. What should have been about my graduation had instantly transformed into a business discussion once he learned of my success. The restaurant he mentioned was indeed one of the most expensive and exclusive in the city, the type of place he had never once offered to take me before. Not for any birthday or achievement or milestone. Actually, I said calmly, I already have plans this evening. My team at SecurePay has arranged a graduation celebration. They've been planning it for weeks. Surely you can reschedule with your employees, my mother suggested, her tone making it clear she considered this the obvious and only reasonable solution. Family comes first. After all, Harper, they would understand. The irony of her statement was so breathtaking, I almost couldn't formulate a response. Family comes first. Where had that principle been when they skipped my valedictorian ceremony for Cassandra's piano recital? Where had it been when they planned to miss my Harvard graduation for a shopping trip? These people aren't just my employees, I said, my voice keyed but firm. They're the ones who have supported me every single step of the way. They're the ones who were there when I needed help, guidance, or just someone to believe in me. They're the ones who showed up for me. So no, I will not be rescheduling. My father's expression hardened, the familiar look of disapproval returning to his face. Harper, I think you're being unreasonable and frankly quite rude. We've driven all the way here to celebrate with you, taken time out of our busy schedules. You came because Cassandra told you about the Forbes article. I interrupted him, my composure finally cracking slightly. Let's not pretend otherwise. You weren't planning to come at all until you realized I was successful enough to be worth your time and attention. Cassandra, to her credit, didn't try to deny it. I did show them the article, she admitted, looking uncomfortable. I follow tech news, and when I saw your name and picture, I thought it was amazing. I showed Mom and Dad immediately. They didn't believe it was really you until Dad looked up the SecurePay website and saw you listed as founder and CEO. So there it was, confirmation of what I'd already suspected. They hadn't had a change of heart about missing my graduation. They had simply discovered that I was now someone worth being associated with, someone whose success could reflect well on them. I appreciate you bringing it to their attention, Cassandra, I said. And I meant it. Whatever her motivation, she had at least been genuinely excited about my achievement. And I'm glad you're all here. But I'm not ready to pretend that everything is suddenly fine between us just because you've discovered I'm financially successful. My mother's face flushed slightly. We've always been proud of you, Harper. We've always known you were capable of great things. We've told you that repeatedly over the years. You told me I was capable. I corrected her. You never actually expressed pride in anything I did. There's a difference. Pride requires actually showing up, actually being present, actually caring about someone's achievements for their own sake, rather than for what those achievements say about you as parents. The tension in our small circle was palpable now. Several nearby families had stopped pretending not to listen, their conversations faltering as they tuned into our drama. My father's face was growing red. A sure sign. His anger was building. After everything we've done for you, he began. What exactly have you done for me? Dad, I asked, my voice still quiet, but carrying clearly in the suddenly attentive crowd around us. Please. I'm genuinely curious. What have you done for me? He sputtered for a moment, clearly not expecting to be challenged so directly. We raised you, provided you with an excellent home, sent you to the best schools. You did the legal minimum required of parents. I interrupted. You provided housing and education, which is your obligation. But you never provided support, not emotional, not financial, beyond what you were legally required to give. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through Harvard while you bought Cassandra new cars and designer clothes. I built my company without a single dollar of your money or a word of your advice or encouragement. And I took the bus to my graduation ceremony today, exactly as you suggested I should, because you were too busy planning Cassandra's shopping trip to drive 2 hours to see me receive my diploma. The crowd around us had grown larger and quieter. This was not the joyful family reunion people expected to witness at a graduation ceremony. My mother tried a different approach, her voice softening in that way she used when she wanted something. Harper, sweetheart, we're still your parents. We deserve to be part of your success, to share in this wonderful achievement. Surely you can see that. Deserve, I repeated, feeling something inside me finally break free. You think you deserve to share in my success, success that I achieved entirely on my own, despite your neglect rather than because of your support. No. You can be part of my life going forward if you genuinely want to build a real relationship based on mutual respect and actual care. But it will have to be on completely different terms than what we've had before. I'm not that desperate little girl seeking your approval anymore. I know my own worth now, and I don't need you to validate it. With those words, I turned and walked away to join Jessica and Professor Wilson, who had been watching from a respectful distance. I left my parents standing among the dispersing crowd of families, for once, watching me walk away instead of them walking away from me. As I walked toward the people who had truly supported me, I heard Cassandra call after me. Harper. Wait. I turned back to see my sister hurrying to catch up, her expression conflicted. When she reached me, she spoke quickly, as if afraid she'd lose her nerve. Can I still come to your celebration tonight? I really do want to hear more about your company. And honestly, she glanced back at our parents, who were standing frozen and apparently arguing with each other in hushed, angry tones. I'm tired. I'm so tired of being their perfect princess. It's exhausting, living up to their expectations when I know the expectations aren't even real. They're just their way of making themselves feel like good parents. Her candid admission surprised me, but also resonated deeply. Perhaps we had both been victims of our parents' dysfunction, just in different ways. You're welcome to join us, I told her sincerely. Jessica, Professor Wilson, and the Secure Pay team would love to meet you. But Cassandra, if you come, I need you to understand something. This isn't about rubbing success in anyone's face or proving anything to mom and dad. It's about celebrating with people who actually care about me as a person, not as a trophy or reflection of themselves. She nodded emphatically. I get it. And Harper, I'm genuinely sorry. I never realized how badly they treated you until I read that article and started thinking back on everything. I was so focused on dealing with my own stuff that I didn't see what they were doing to you. That's not an excuse. But I want you to know I see it now. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness but from the unexpected gift of my sister finally truly seeing me. Thank you, I said simply. That means more than you know. Together, Cassandra and I walked away from our parents and toward the people who had become my chosen family. Behind us, I heard my father call out, Harper, Cassandra, we're not finished with this conversation. But we were finished. At least, I was finished with the old dynamic, the old expectations, the old desperate need for their approval. Whatever relationship we might build in the future would have to be something entirely new. Something based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than the toxic patterns of my childhood. As we joined Jessica and Professor Wilson, both women embraced me warmly. That took courage. Professor Wilson said quietly, I'm proud of you. So am I, Jessica added. That was long overdue. The celebration that evening at a rooftop venue overlooking the Charles River was everything my family's hypothetical dinner would never have been. It was genuine, joyful, and filled with people who knew the real me. The struggling student who had worked 3 jobs. The determined entrepreneur who had coded until dawn. The friend who had shared ramen dinners and study sessions. The mentee who had soaked up every bit of guidance and wisdom offered. My team from Secure Pay had arranged everything. And as I looked around at the faces of people who had believed in me and supported me through the hardest years of my life, I felt wealthy in ways that had nothing to do with my company's valuation. This was what success really looked like, not a billion-dollar company or a Forbes feature, but a community of people who valued you for who you truly were. Cassandra stayed the entire evening, asking intelligent questions about the company, talking with my team members, and slowly beginning to see a different path for her own life. By the end of the night, she had decided to defer her enrollment at UCLA and spend a gap year figuring out what she actually wanted rather than what our parents expected of her. I think I've been living their dream, not mine, she confessed as we stood together on the rooftop, watching the sun set over the city. Just like they forced you to live without their support, they forced me to live with too much of the wrong kind of support. We were both casualties of their dysfunction. She was right. And in recognizing that truth together, we began building a real sisterhood for the first time in our lives.